Just a little bit of background about the project itself. This webinar is part of the Tri-State SARE Professional Development Project. You can find out more information about that project by clicking on the link there that's on the screen. It's a collaborative project among the universities of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. It is funded through the USDA and Northeast SARE. A little bit more about SARE coming up in just a few minutes to give everybody some of that background information as well. Our project is in its second year of a 3-year project, and we're continuing our efforts on pasture-based systems for sustainable livestock production. This year, we're offering a webinar series in particular to pasture resiliency and adaptation in the face of climate change. Today is our 3rd webinar in the series. We have several presentations, and we'll also be hearing from 3 farmers who have done some bale grazing themselves on their farms. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to Joe Bonelli, who's the Connecticut State SARE Coordinator. He's also the PI on the Tri-State SARE project. He's going to discuss some of the grant opportunities that Northeast SARE provides. Joe?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Rachel, for the introduction. The chart you see in front of you gives an overall listing of the various Northeast SARE grants that are available. Notice the top one is our farmer grants. Those are grants for up to $30,000. And by the way, Northeast SARE grants are not matching. There's no match required for the program. So again, for the farmer grant programs, those are $30,000. Partnership grants are also up to $30,000 as well too. You'll see not just the level of funding, but also project duration. When proposals are typically due as well too. For example, the farmer grants are first in fall, with contracts start in spring. Those are kind of general guidelines as well. So I suggest respectfully you visit the Northeast SARE website or reach out to Rachel or I for more detailed information. For the farmer grants, farmers generating at least $1,000 would qualify, and typically farmer grants, as well as many of the Northeast SARE grants, et cetera, are funding projects, for example, basically testing, ideas, new ways of growing something, new ideas of marketing something, the how to test a theory that you might have as well too. So again, this one chart gives you just a general overview of the various Northeast SARE projects, grant programs, duration, amount of funding, et cetera. I will note that there appears to be a slight hold on some of the grant programs available this year due to changes in funding from Northeast SARE and USDA. So again, to see if any grants that you're looking to apply for are on a pause or whatever, again, feel free to reach out to Rachel or I, and also the Northeast SARE website can be helpful as well. In addition to Northeast SARE providing, I think, some excellent grant opportunities for either farmers or actuaries providers or grad students or whatever, Northeast SARE also provides a wealth of materials available. These could be, fact sheets, bulletins, booklets, et cetera, on a whole array of topics as well too. Most of the resource materials are available online as PDFs for free. There are a few that have a cost, but most are free as PDFs as well too. If you're thinking of applying for a grant, one other attribute of the Northeast SARE website, it kind of gives you a sense of other grants that have been awarded in not just the Northeast SARE region, but also other regions of SARE across the country as well too. So again, you get a sense of some of the other projects, so what some of the other projects entail. And lastly, I'll say that one of the huge benefits or attributes of Northeast SARE funding and grant programs is that the data is all shared. So the research that you're compiling as a farmer or actuaries provider, the results of your research or results of your analysis are also made available to all other farmers and people interested in your project as well too. So it's a matter of wealth sharing and income sharing and information sharing as well too. It looks like you got an exciting program today. So without further ado, I'll hand the program back over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Joe. At this point, I would like to invite Jean King, who's our project facilitator, to just touch upon our online discussion group that's coming up in just a few short weeks on Wednesday, April 9th. Jean? Jean, you're muted.
Good morning, everybody. Quick apology. Somehow or other, we got mixed up in sending the links this morning. I've resent the link to everyone that had got the other one, and I hope it's working for everyone. And so we're talking about our online discussion group, which we, following up with some discussions that we had last year, it seemed like a good time for all of us, all of you who have participated, to get together and talk about your personal, as much as you want, your personal experiences, what you want to share with others, and what questions you may have for other farmers or people who are working with farmers from the first 3 workshops that we had. So this discussion group is scheduled for Wednesday, April 9th from 10 to 12. And it really is, as I say, an opportunity to share and think about what you're going to do next, what you have learned thus far and need to learn more about from the sessions that we've had. We're going to have some people, I don't know, maybe we'll have some people to start off with their own questions, but it's really an open discussion, and there will be a link sent out, and it will be the correct link. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. I should mention too quickly, Jean, I don't know if you saw my message on the other end, but somebody did mention in the chat that there were a few people waiting in the lobby of that other link. So if you could see if they still are and try to get them switched over.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Let's get back on track here. I just want to take a few minutes to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Justine Deming is a clinical associate teaching professor of animal management at the University of Rhode Island, where she's been working since 2018. Prior to URI, she pursued a master's in animal welfare in Canada and completed her doctorate work on dairy farm labor efficiency and management in Ireland. Dr. Deming has a passion for grass-based agriculture and has had the pleasure of teaching various livestock management courses revolving around pastured animals, including a course specifically on pasture and grazing management. Her current role includes both teaching and extension. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. I'm going to turn it over to Justine, who's going to get us started today.
Great, thank you, Rachel. It's just loading up. All right, can you see that now?
Sorry, I can, but we're not, there you go. Now you're in presentation mode.
There we go. All right, so you said I have about 40 minutes. Is that right, Rachel? Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay,
Sorry.
perfect.
Sorry, Justine.
Thank you,
I'll get
Rachel.
Struggling over here today.
All right, well, thank you so much for the introduction and thanks for having me. Really happy to be here. So like Rachel mentioned, I'm going to be discussing pasture adaptation techniques for a changing climate in relation to the practice of bale grazing. So bale grazing, first of all, I'm going to go over a quick outline. So just as a quick review, I'm going to talk a little bit about soils and then kind of get into the what, the why, the when, and the how in relation to bale grazing, and then just do a quick summary. So when we talk about the main properties of soil, we're frequently referring to soil texture and soil structure, which are two very different things. Soil texture, it refers to the feel of the soil. So this is affected by the constituent materials found within it, specifically sand, silt, and clay particles. Of course, sand will feel gritty, but maybe a wet clay will feel heavy and sticky. And the texture of the soil has a direct impact on the way that the soil reacts to certain environmental conditions. For example, towards drought or maybe a heavy rain, with sandy soils more freely draining of that moisture. And then in regard to soil structure is something that can be altered by humans. And we consider the binding together of soil particles into aggregates or crumbs, and that influences the abundance of soil pore space or maybe the lack thereof. And in the ideal model, when we think about the ideal model of soil, we kind of want it to be about 50% pore space and 50% solids. And part of that 50% solids is being made up of what we call organic material. And unlike soil texture, like I mentioned, soil structure can be altered by humans, either for better or for worse. Heavy treading from animal impact, machinery, heavy tilling, all of these things can have a negative impact on the amount of compaction or pore space that we have in that soil. And improving the proportion of organic matter can help to reduce those impacts of compaction and reduced pore space, which I'll explain a little bit in the next couple of slides. So I think that these graphics can maybe help to visualize the differences between a healthy and a compromised soil structure. Healthy soils that are managed in such a way that reduce compaction and have optimized soil organic matter and increase the pore space can make soils more resilient, especially in times of flooding or drought. They're also more able to produce better yields of the plants that we are trying to grow in them, and thus be able to better feed the livestock effectively. We know that perennial grass and legume pastures provide a great richness of biodiversity, both above and below the ground, and can help us achieve this outcome. When soils are managed in such a way that reduces pore space and increases compaction, like overtilling or maybe maintaining animals on wet pastures that really should be rested, we see a decrease in overall soil quality, a decrease in resilience, and soils that maybe are less able to deal with climate change and the presence of flooding, and then also drought. And so with heavy rainfall or flooding, these compromised soils that may be compacted are less able to absorb and store water, and we see a higher incidence of water runoff, carrying with it all the nutrients sitting on top of the soil that can decrease the nutrients available to the plants that are living in the soil, and then potentially harm waterways that these nutrients are running off into. All right, so what is bale grazing? Bale grazing, it is the act of feeding out bales that could either be large, round, dry bales, or they may be wrapped, sometimes we call them wet bales or baleage, that have a higher proportion of moisture and have maybe gone through the ensiling process. And we feed them throughout the winter period. In some cases, it might be at other time points throughout the year, which we'll discuss a little bit. But basically, we're feeding out the feed on the pasture, on haylands, and maybe even on cropland or tillage land. So inevitably, a proportion of that feed ends up being left on the land and results in increased organic matter. I like to call this type of feeding bed and breakfast hay, because we lay it down, they eat it, and then whatever they don't end up eating, they'll inevitably kind of lay down on, especially in the winter. But all that's going to get broken down and contribute to increased soil organic matter. So any of that residual forage that's left uneaten after the cattle or whatever type of animal that we're doing bale grazing with have moved to the next area, it hasn't been a waste. It's a great source of nutrients and subsequent forage for forage crops. It's litter to help increase water holding capacity, water infiltration of the soil, and can actually act as a forage species seed bank as well if we're trying to build up certain types of forage species in that area. Bale grazing can be done on its own as the sole feed source to the animals, or sometimes people will do it in conjunction with stockpiled forages, maybe in the late fall, early winter, or in times of the year where maybe there's a shortage of pasture for grazing. So it can be used to kind of supplement what we already have on the pasture. The practice, it's common with cattle, but it's common with cattle because they can generally handle wrapped bales. If we are using any kind of wrapped and ensiled bale, those are typically not suitable for other classes of livestock that might have more stomachs that can't quite handle variations in feed quality. Sometimes we see a bit of spoilage with wrapped bales, but we can do it with other species as well. Plenty of people do this with dry hay bales and have no issues, or maybe wrapped bales that are wrapped at a very low moisture content. So it can be done with other species as well. In the photo here on the bottom right, I have a picture of our Peckham farm at URI with our sheep. We do it with sheep and cattle here and have had success with both. So bale grazing, it's become popular for a number of reasons, but one of the main ones is that it can help with remediation of land where soil quality has been depleted. It's an excellent way to increase soil organic matter, like I've mentioned. And soil organic matter, it usually ranges in topsoil from maybe 1% to 6% if we were to look at the output from a soil test that we took from the soil and sent to the lab. And the type of soil plays a role in whether the reading is considered an acceptable amount or depleted amount of soil organic matter in that reading. And a Michigan study actually found that soils that demonstrated that had a higher soil organic matter, with every 1% increase in soil organic matter, they were seeing roughly a crop yield increase of about 12% for every 1% increase in soil organic matter. So it does have a lot of opportunities to really improve the quality of that soil. And the ability of organic matter to hold on to positively charged molecules like calcium, potassium, and magnesium in a way that makes them available to the plants is known as cation exchange capacity, or CEC. You might see on a soil lab output as well. And decomposing organic matter has many negative charges. So the soil organic matter has a lot of negative charges on it. And because opposites attract, the soil organic matter holds on to those important positively charged molecules and keeps them from leaching or from washing through the soil. And they can actually be made available to the plants. So studies on both undisturbed and agricultural soils show that as organic matter increases, soils tend to be less compact and have more space for air passage, helping to conduct water into the soil and storing it for plants to use. And organic matter as residue on the soil surface or as a binding agent for aggregates near the surface plays an important role in decreasing soil erosion. So as with leaves and stems of living plants, surface residues intercept raindrops and decrease their potential to detach soil particles and lead to erosion. So these surface residues also slow down water as it flows across the field, giving it a better chance to infiltrate into that soil. And we know that since erosion tends to remove the most fertile parts of the soil, it can cause significant reduction in crop yields. And in some soils, the loss of just a couple inches of topsoil could result in really drastic reductions in overall crop yield. The surface of soils low in organic matter might seal over or crust. And so then as rainfall comes down, it breaks those aggregates and pores near the surface to fill with solids. And when this happens, water that can't infiltrate into the soil, it runs off the field, carrying away with it all of that valuable topsoil. So in addition to the positive impacts on soil health, some producers implement bale grazing as a management tool to balance animal health. Keeping animals out of barns can improve respiratory and hoof health while reducing the direct costs of labor, machinery, maintenance, fuel, and also fertilizer costs. Because remember that we're actually going to, when we have those animals on that pasture, bale grazing, all their excrement is being absorbed into the soil as well. So others see it as an opportunity to improve work-life balance. So in the off season, by setting out bales and setting up fencing ahead of time, or offering enough bales to get them through the week, you can get away with having minimal help and maybe take a week off and go spend time with the family and have someone come that all they need to do is undo an electric fence or maybe undo a wrapped bale, and the cows will do the rest, or whatever species we're working with. So why should we bale graze? There may be areas on the farm that could benefit from improved soil structure. And one of my favorite sayings with anything regarding farming is, if we can measure it, we can manage it. And so taking soil samples of the entire farm can help determine which areas could benefit most from looking at the current soil organic matter and compaction readings. And then we can soil sample again at a later time point to see if our management practices have actually improved our soil quality. So at Peckham Farm at the University of Rhode Island, bale grazing has been implemented over the past several winters with the goal of increasing soil organic matter in mind. So as you can see here on the left was 2021, I believe, and in the span of 3 years, we've seen a marked increase in the soil organic matter from 3.5% all the way up to 4.8%. And remember that the typical range for soil organic matter might be 1 to 6%. And with each additional of soil organic matter, we can see increasing yields of whatever it is that we've planted or that we have growing. You'll also notice that our scoop density measure has been slightly decreasing along with the increase in soil organic matter. Scoop density, which is how UMass interprets it, it can be seen as bulk density perhaps in other readings, but scoop density is the mass per unit volume or grams per cubic centimeter that gives an idea of the level of compaction of the soil. And so values typically range between 1.0 and 1.25, with lower values associated with higher organic matter levels. So with our increased soil organic matter, it makes sense that our compaction readings have decreased as well. So this is really encouraging. So when should bale grazing take place? The most common time to start bale grazing is at the end of the growing season, or the end of the fall, I suppose. And farmers would typically choose to practice bale grazing on drier, more well-drained soils for the fall and winter that will result in less soil compaction. Sometimes producers might extend the grazing season with stockpiled forages. If they're feeding brassicas, like in the bottom right-hand corner here, bale grazing in conjunction with brassicas, which are very high in protein, can be a really good option to help slow down the digestion of that high protein feed that tends to be digested very quickly and run through the animal too fast. And like I mentioned previously, this practice, it doesn't have to be limited to the late fall and winter months. It can be utilized during times of pasture shortages to maintain the benefits of bale grazing on the environment, or in times of overly lush pasture in the summer or late spring, or plant matter with high crude protein that producers want to help, again, slow down that digestion. So when should bale grazing occur? It should be noted that at the tail end of the bale grazing season, it's important to pull animals off pasture in the early spring, especially if it's being performed on heavier soil types and once the grass starts to green up. We know that we need to give the grass a chance to grow to the appropriate heights before starting spring grazing. And new growth is absolutely irresistible to ruminants, regardless of how tasty the bale might be, and we do not want to compromise the upcoming grazing season. It should be noted that practicing bale grazing, it might delay spring grazing slightly due to organic matter covering the grass and maybe slowing down the green up stage, but it will get there eventually. Another aspect of the springtime is generally predictably wet weather. So while bale grazing can help soils that have previously been compacted by helping to increase soil organic matter over time, care does need to be taken to avoid placing animals on low points or areas that are prone to water retention, as having animals out could actually inadvertently damage the pasture further and undo our remediation goals. So how do we do bale grazing? So I'm going to talk a little bit about planning. With the planning, as with everything else in the farm, planning is key. And we can first evaluate with the goals of trying to bale graze for the farm. So soil testing the entire farm can be a great place to start. If the farm is looking to improve subsequent pasture quality or to help establish new pasture, bale grazing can be an excellent option. And we do have to take into consideration the availability of fencing, which can be problematic if bale grazing is being tried in an area that maybe isn't normally used for grazing. So if it's in hay fields or cropland, if the animals need easy access to water that will not freeze throughout the winter, and consider if the group of animals that we're going to be using this for, will they need access to shelter? This may be dependent on the species, the breed, and perhaps the physiological stage that they're at. So as a reminder, the goal for bale grazing is to have a positive impact on the pasture, not a detrimental one. So before starting this practice, understanding the farm's soil texture and current structure can help us make decisions on where bale grazing might be the most beneficial. So I'm just going to do a quick review. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just a quick review of our major soil textures and some of their attributes. So sandy soil in the bottom left-hand corner of this soil triangle is characterized by large, coarse, excessively drained particles. This soil struggles with fertility and would greatly benefit from bale grazing to increase that soil quality by increasing soil organic matter. The well-draining nature of this soil will mean that there will be little risk for causing compaction, and sandy soils are very well set up for bale grazing. Silty soils are going to be more fertile than sandy soils, and can still benefit from increased soil organic matter though. Typically these soils have better water holding capacity than sand, And compaction is generally not a major concern, but we would still want to be careful to not let over treading occur during heavy weather. But this one is also a good option for bale grazing. Next, we have loamy soils. So loamy soils are normally viewed as some of the most fertile soils for agricultural purposes. And as with our other soil types, we can always benefit from increased soil organic matter. It should be noted, though, that depending on the topography of the farm, we would want to be careful, especially in heavy weather where we've got a lot of moisture, to not let animals compact the soil and risk harming the structure of the soil. So a little bit more care does need to be taken when we're dealing with loamy soils. And then finally, we have clay soils. So in general, clay soils are characterized by very small particle sizes and a tendency to hold on to water. In times of drought, this is very handy, but in times of heavy weather, this can become problematic. These soils do have a higher propensity to be more fertile, and they may not require the increased soil organic matter from bale grazing, but it probably still wouldn't hurt. We're always looking to improve soil organic matter, but we do just need to be very cognizant that we can lead to maybe more damage to the soil in very waterlogged areas that might not be well drained. So I'm not sure how familiar people are with this particular tool. Maybe you're very well versed in it. Maybe this is the first time you're seeing it, but I did just want to bring it up here because in terms of planning for bale grazing, there are free tools available online to producers. And if you wanted to try bale grazing, but you're unsure of the type of soil that you have on the property, this USDA online tool Web Soil Survey, it's an excellent free resource that has so much information about all of the properties. So you can go in and look at any property with this tool. And one of the major awesome things about it is that it can tell you the soil types that you have present on the property. So just to kind of give you a little bit of navigating, it can be a little bit confusing at first, but once you kind of play around with it, it does get pretty easy to use. I'm just going to flip through a couple points on how to at least find out the soil types that you might have on the farm or the property that you're interested in. So first you need to either find the farm on the map. You can just kind of zoom around and find the map on your own, or you can go and utilize this kind of search area, the quick navigation, and directly type in whatever the address is that you're interested in. For the purpose of this, I'm going to use the University of Rhode Island. And so once you've located your farm and it's in the map and in the visual, you want to define the area and get an area of interest, or AOI as it's called. So you'll click on the AOI icon and select the area of interest. So you go and you drop a lot of points and then you double click it and it'll turn into this kind of hashed photo on the far right here. And that'll show you that is your area of interest, and that is the area that's going to be pulling up information. So once your AOI has been determined, you can then delve into the different attributes of Web Soil Survey. And if you click on the Soils tab that I've highlighted in the red box there, the map will show you different soils throughout the farm. It is important to note that these soils are very unlikely to change. So remember that soil texture, it is what it is. That's pretty much the soil that you have, is what's been there. And that legend will indicate what the abbreviations that you're going to see on the map will mean on the left-hand side. So you'll see on the map, it gives you little abbreviations, and on the left, it gives you more descriptions. You can go and you can click on those blue areas, and it'll give you a bit more information. So if you click on the soil type that's highlighted in blue, and you can scroll down and it'll show you the properties and qualities, and it'll give you some important information like the drainage and the runoff class, and also the depth to the water table could be important. And the majority of this farm at URI is an excellent, it's in an excellent position to do bale grazing because we do have good soils and they are very, very well drained. So I do want to just point out that there is an area on Peckham that we do not put animals in the bottom right-hand corner here. And I'm just going to kind of show you what the readings would look like that maybe you would want to take caution and not do bale grazing. And so not that we put animals on this area of the farm anyway, but it is just a good example. So this is kind of a swampy area. You can see that we have a little bit of a pond right there. And so if we click on that particular one, it'll pull up again some more information. And in the description, it notes that this is not prime farmland area, that it's very poorly drained, and it's at risk of ponding. And since I know this property, this is obvious to me. I've been out there, I know what it looks like. However, if I was looking for properties to maybe lease or to own, and I'm doing my information gathering, utilizing these maps can be really helpful to get an idea of what you'd be getting into or how you might want to alter your management strategies to yield the best results in your venture. Okay, so a little bit more on planning. So in addition to soil testing to get a better idea of soil health on the farm, it might also be worth the time and the effort to perform nutrient testing on the bales that we do plan to use over the winter, because this can help further ensure that we're meeting the nutritional needs and the physiological status of our herd. And this ensures that the animals have a level plane of nutrition, because we do want to avoid the rumen roller coaster if we are managing ruminants on the pasture. That I'd rather be looking at it than looking for it is another one of my favorite sayings when it comes to farm management. So ensuring that we have enough feed to get us through the winter period is critical to avoid panic purchases midwinter and paying premiums due to poor planning at the beginning of the season. So when we do our calculations to determine how much food an animal needs, we do this on what we call a dry matter basis, and as a proportion of their body weight. So basically, we determine how many pounds of nutrients an animal needs per day, disregarding the amount of water in this calculation, because the amount of water is extremely variable in any food. And then when we know which food we're going to be feeding, we add that proportion of water back in to the original number. So when we do this, we're talking about it on a dry matter basis when we're not counting any water. And so then we add that water back in of whatever the food is that we are planning to feed, we can add that proportion of water back in. It's kind of like saying I want to eat a 1/4 pound of oats. And so you can say, okay, well, a 1/4 pound of dry oats is a different amount of nutrients than a 1/4 pound of oats prepared as oatmeal, which is going to have a significant proportion of water in that 1/4 pound and would not be as nutrient dense as the straight up 1/4 pound of dry oats. So if you're not familiar with measuring things on the dry matter basis. So also we'll need to have an idea of the approximate amount of feed that will be fed out that will not be consumed by the animals. Because remember, we're going to be leaving a lot of that food on the pasture. That's kind of the whole point of bale grazing. So we call this wastage or wasted feed, but I have this in quotes because it's not truly being wasted, as it is contributing to improve soil organic matter. But in relation to the amount of food being fed, it would be considered as quote unquote waste in our calculations. So in case you're unfamiliar with the typical benchmarks, generally we allot maybe 2 to 2.5% of body weight in dry matter for animals that are not physiologically quote unquote working. So working animals require a bit more and might range anywhere between 2.5 up to maybe 4%. Working animals would be animals that are lactating. Those are our hardest workers on the farm, or maybe breeding animals. Intact males that might be breeding would be considered working animals as well. And so while ruminants don't necessarily need to be housed indoors, if they are being housed outdoors, especially for bale grazing in inclement winter weather, producers should plan on providing them just maybe a 0.5% body weight in dry matter per day extra, as to not impact their maintenance needs. And also, if we're expecting them to be quote unquote working over that period, we don't want them to be dedicating those working calories to just staying warm. So we would want to boost them a little bit by maybe 0.5% each day. So there is a word of caution is required for when we're managing young stock or thin animals, and especially thin dams that are nursing, regardless of our species. Supplemental feed and shelter, it might also be required for these animals, and bale grazing may not be the best option for these groups. So it does take a little bit of care to decide which animals are going to be best suited to doing bale grazing. And if feed intended for bale grazing was tested prior to utilization, which is what we should be doing, producers can have a good idea of whether or not the protein and energy supplementation might be necessary, or if their feed alone will be able to maintain the herd without negatively impacting body condition score or health of the animals. So when we're doing our calculations, it might be better to overestimate the amount or account for that lost or wastage, especially in the instance when we're bale grazing, where the goal is to leave a significant amount of organic matter on the soil. And so producers have to ensure that they're feeding adequate quantities. And we can assume upwards of sometimes 60% loss or wastage when we're bale grazing. And additionally, producers need to also predetermine and maybe overestimate the length of the winter feeding period to account for the amount of feed that they'll need to either make or purchase to get through that winter feeding period without having to pay premiums and be panic buying. And so then finally, as with any time that we're managing livestock, but especially when we're practicing bale grazing, always keeping an eye on body condition score to ensure that animals are not losing weight or over conditioning, which is a little bit less likely, but generally that we don't want them to be losing too much body condition. And this requires us to be having a solid understanding of how to body condition score whatever species it is that we're using. This is really important for any time that we're farming, but especially when we're bale grazing and animals are going to be out throughout the winter. It's not a bad idea to have a regular time frame of when we do body condition scoring, writing it down, and then going in after a certain amount of time, a couple months, going back and doing it again, recording it, because if we are measuring it and we can manage it and we're doing it over time, it can be really helpful. So I'm going to walk through some steps of how we can plan for bale grazing in terms of making those calculations. So there's a lot of text on some of these slides, but I just wanted to put it up here just in case you wanted to take a picture or write it down. I am going to share with Rachel, I do have these steps written out in a one-page document with an example, if that would be more helpful, but just to kind of walk you through it. So our first step is to get an estimate of the weight of the animals in the herd, because remember, we're basing it off of a % of their body weight in dry matter. So that means that we need to have a rough idea of how much those animals weigh. And maybe we can use a scale if we have a scale. At Peckham, we have a lot of student help. And so as part of one of our labs, we use weight tapes, which are really inexpensive, and we can get a good idea roughly of how much our animals weigh. But we also need to know their physiological status. Are they dry? Are they just doing maintenance? Are they lactating? Are they gestating? Because that's going to dictate what % of their body weight and dry matter we're going to be allotting them every day. And we also need to take into consideration the size of the group, because we might have a couple of lactating cows that are all in the same physiological status, but their weights are very different. So we might have one 900-pound first calf heifer who's lactating, or we might have a 1,300-pound huge cow that's also lactating. And because we're basing it off of a proportion of their body weight, we do need to take that into consideration, because the 900-pound cow's needs will be different than the 1,300-pound cow needs. So let's see. Weight tapes are handy. Body condition score, if you're wanting them to increase body condition score, that's another thing we would take into consideration in terms of % body weight allotment. So then the next step, so we have that, and now we need to know, okay, how much of our food that we have decided to feed the animals is moisture. I mentioned how we do everything off of a dry matter basis, and that's fine. But when it comes to actually feeding your animals, you need to actually take into consideration the proportion of water in order for us to get our quote unquote as fed weight per day. So in order to do this, we need to know the % moisture of whatever the bales are. So it's important to note that baleage or wet bales can be very variable in the amount of moisture. It might be 35% moisture. They could be up to 60, maybe even 65% moisture. And that will greatly impact the weight of that bale in relation to the amount of nutrients. So we need to take that into consideration. So we're going to multiply the number that we calculated in step 1 by the % moisture of the desired feed. So if we're feeding dry hay, that might be 15% moisture. And you would multiply your pounds of dry matter from step 1 that you've determined and multiply it by whatever % moisture the feed is that you're going to be feeding, and add this number, aka the amount of water, back to that dry matter number. And now we have our as fed basis. So this is again specific to whatever type of feed you are choosing to feed. And remember that, again, baleage can be very high in water, and it's really important that we get an accurate moisture measurement if we want to get accurate calculations. So now we know our as-fed basis, but remember that a good proportion of that food is not going to actually be consumed by the animal. It's going to be quote unquote wasted and left on the pasture or left onto the field. So we need to assume that there will be some wastage, and in the case of bale grazing, that could be up to 60%. So we're going to take the number, our as-fed number from number 2, and we're going to multiply it by whatever our assumed % wastage will be, and add that to step number 2. And now we know what our true as fed pounds per day with wastage accounted for is going to be. So this is an important number. So next, we need to determine, well, how many days is our winter period? Or how many days is the period that we're doing bale grazing or we're feeding out winter feed? So we're going to multiply our number from step 3, our as fed with wastage accounted for, by however long the winter feeding period is going to be, or whatever the bale grazing period will be. Now we have total pounds of feed needed to perform the bale grazing for that determined period of time. And so this now allows us to plan accordingly with how much food do we need to purchase or how much food do we need to make. So now finally, how many bales does that look like? So in reality, we talk usually in the cows need 3 bales a day, or they need two bales, whatever it is on your farm. So how many bales do I need in total? So determine the weight of the bales that have been made or purchased. We have a scale at the farm that we can set a bale on, and if there's uniformity in the bales that have been purchased or made, you don't need to weigh all of them, maybe just one of them or 2 of them if you're not sure if they're completely the same. And that'll give you an idea of the weight of the bale, and we know the percent moisture. So now we have our full amount of feed, the pounds that we need for that entire winter grazing season or winter bale grazing season, and we can divide it by the weight of our bales in order to get how many bales do we need to get us through the winter, or how many tons of feed do we need for the winter if we're buying it by the ton. So now that we've determined on the farm, where on the farm makes sense to try bale grazing, we've done the math and we've determined how many bales we need to complete the season. And we also know how many bales our herd needs access to per day from step 4 of our math, which is our pounds per day as fed with wastage accounted for. So producers will typically set bales on their round sides, maybe 35 to 40 feet apart, and they'll be placed strategically in cells, or sometimes they're called bale pods, with electric fencing around them. And so some farms will leave the bales out in the field as they have been made in the summer months, while others might go out and place the bales out at the beginning of the bale grazing season, or bring them out daily. But part of the reason of doing bale grazing is to reduce the amount of labor. So a lot of people will do this ahead of time, and then just open the bales up as they need them. Some farms will remove the bale and net wrap prior to allowing cattle to access the feed at the bale, and some farms will opt to roll out the bales more evenly across the piece of land, either manually or with a tractor implement. It's kind of, I'm sure some of our farmers will give us insight onto which methods they prefer more. And so kind of like when we're doing rotational grazing, strip grazing or access, or allowing animals access to these bale pods by opening up new sections of electric fence and allowing them to gain access just to the ones that we want them to, will result in more uniform nutrient intake, but then also more uniform nutrient output from the animals, because part of the reason that we like bale grazing is that they're putting those nutrients back on the land with their manure and their urine. So the more specific we can be about it, about giving them access, the more specific we get with nutrients being put back onto the pasture as well. So remember that part of that goal is to evenly spread the manure and the urine out onto the land. And so, like I just mentioned, that can be better achieved in a rotational grazing system when we have more specific management over where the animals are. And that does kind of translate into bale grazing access as well. And so the number of days that producers might choose to allow their cattle or their other animals to have access to the pod of bales will depend on how many bales are being placed, what the need is of the animals per day, the quality of the feed. If it's low quality that we know from beforehand and they need more of it, we need to account for that. Again, the body condition scoring, keeping an eye on that. The weather, so again, remember we need to include maybe 0.5% more of dry matter per day per animal if we have really inclement weather. And then the farmer's personal goals and management style as well. So a lot of farms do this because of the labor savings, like I mentioned. So some people might want to give the cows more access each day, maybe every 3 days, maybe once a week, where other producers, it might work really well for them to open it up and let animals have access for maybe 20 to 30 days. It's really dependent on the system and what their goals are with the system. If they're doing it more so just to have a better work-life balance, and maybe they're not so concerned about the soil organic matter improvements on the property, and the nutrients from the animals, maybe having that 20 to 30 day time slot works a little bit better for them than having to go out and give them new access every day or every week. So one of the main things that we want to do is, again, if we're not measuring it, we're not managing it. So if we took soil samples at the very beginning, it's an excellent idea to take soil samples again at a later time point, maybe a year after you've tried this, or 2 years or 3 years, or doing it on a regular basis to see incrementally, are we making improvements? So in summary, bale grazing can be an excellent tool to help build up that soil organic matter and improve soil structure while reducing the winter labor demands. And as with anything with farming, planning is going to be the key to success, and knowing the soils that are well suited to the practice and being able to accurately determine the amount of feed required before starting bale grazing can help set the farm up really well. Site location, availability of resources, species and breed of the animal, knowledge of body condition score and physiological state of the animals are all important factors to take into consideration. And so ecologically sound management of agricultural soils using practices that promote that buildup of organic matter certainly has a part to play in combating climate change. It offers a win-win outcome because higher levels of organic matter also increase the resilience of soils that are being confronted with more intense storms, dry periods resulting from a warming planet with increasingly destabilized weather patterns. So sorry if that was a lot of information, but with that, I'll take any questions. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Justine. We do have a couple minutes before you got a couple minutes ahead of schedule. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to post them in the chat now. We can go over them before we jump into some of our farmer presentations.
I got a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I was wondering what your ballpark waste factor is for hay. I've heard 15%, 20%, and that goes to whether they feed it in a pod or they strip graze it. What's your gut telling you that you can afford to waste for fertility, not waste?
For fertility, so our farmers might be able to give a little bit better, or people that are farmers that have done this a lot might have a better answer for you for this. In my experience, that looking at maybe a 40% utilization from the animals, meaning that it's like 60% waste, and a lot of that is going right back onto the land and being utilized. So I'm not quite sure a particular number. Again, it might depend on whether we're rolling out the bales or doing it in pods. I know a lot of farmers that prefer to roll it out because they feel like they get more uniformity of that, the hay being absorbed back into the soil, and perhaps the animals aren't eating quite as much in that way, but more is being delivered back to the soil in that method.
Thank you.
Justine, another quick question here. Would adding organic matter to slightly wetter areas help to balance out the moisture and reduce the wetness of the area over time?
That's a good question. When we're adding soil organic matter, it certainly helps with infiltration and the ability of that soil to be able to utilize the water and be able to absorb it better. In relation to if that type of soil is already heavy clay soil, I'm not sure if soil organic matter would have a huge impact on that. I'm admittedly not a soil scientist, so that's not particularly my area of expertise, but my gut instinct would be that the more the more that we do bale graze on areas like that, it would only benefit probably getting that water infiltration down and into the soil rather than sitting.
To answer another question, Liz is asking, where can we get the presentation? This is great information. It will be posted on our website, as well as the recording from today's webinar on our website as well. You guys, after attending our webinars, are now on our monthly correspondence emails. So If you don't see it on the website, there will be a direct link sent out to you if you can't for some reason find it within the next month that has all of this information. All right, so this is, I think, what we're going to do. We have some more questions coming in, which is great. We do have time set aside at the end of the farmer presentations for a lot more questions. So I think in an effort to stay on track today, we are going to switch over to the farmer presentations at this point. Jenny Kepsikevich from Stonehill Farm in Connecticut is our first presenter. She's going to introduce herself, but she is bale grazed for a number of years now. She has beef cattle. So Jenny, I'll let you take it away, and I can confirm. I can see your share. There we go. I see you sharing your screen and you're in presentation mode. So you're all set.
Excellent. Good morning. Thank you, Rachel. Justine, that was excellent. Thank you very much. My name is Jenny Kepsikevich. My husband and I operate a grass-fed farm here in Plainfield, Connecticut. So we are on the Rhode Island, Connecticut border, on the eastern side of Connecticut. We are a cow-calf to finish operation. We consider ourselves first-generation farmers, even though my husband grew up as the fourth generation to milk cows on their dairy farm. His family's dairy farm was a conventional dairy farm, and so we feel our practices are completely different. None of that farm is on this farm, so hence the first generation classification. If you have never sat through a talk with me, I just always throw out this caveat. Please know that the experiences I'm about to share are very specific to our farm, our landscape, our species. I hope that you can find something that you can apply on your own farm, but please don't hear anything as a hard, fast truth. These are what we tried. These are the things we tried, that we explored, that we modified. And so I just want to make sure that everybody kind of comes into this with an open mind because your operation is different and you know your operation best. So a little bit about where we farm. So this blue outline, we have 68 acres, but this blue outline represents a permanent 5-line high tensile perimeter fence around 35 acres. So we do not have any permanent fencing within this system. So I'm going to describe briefly, I recognize that we're here for bale grazing. I'm going to just describe briefly what our grazing management is, because it really does play a pivotal factor in how we bale graze. So, oh, and one more thing, since Justine mentioned it, we are Paxton and Montauk fine sandy loams here. Most of our farm is. So we are generally, decently draining, although I do have some areas that are soggy under certain conditions. We graze approximately May 1st to November 1st. We can extend that grazing season depending on conditions and number of animals, but that typically is what we do. We also consider ourselves adaptive management grazers. We graze in different places at different times in different directions every year. So every year is a new year for us. It's kind of a clean slate. We start over. Recognizing that we have certain areas that obviously we can't get on as soon as we can on for other areas. We have a 12-hour residency during our grazing season, and we have anywhere from 60 to 90-day rests. We also lease 25 acres of hay ground off-site. The 2 stars on my presentation are important to note when we talk about bale grazing. Those stars are an on-demand geothermal water fountain. So basically it's a frost-free water source. So when we consider where and when we're grazing our bales, we have to know how we're going to get them back to water. So a little bit about our animals. Obviously, we are a beef operation, so cattle it is. And you'll see throughout this presentation that some of the colors and species, breeds of the animals have changed over time. But we really believe passionately about grass grazing. And so for us, we have really worked hard to develop a herd that works as hard for us. And so we have now developed 2 registered herds. We have a herd of registered Red Devons and a herd of registered Red Angus. And we breed specifically through an all AI program to improve our genetics in the sense of we want really small framed animals that are excellent converters of energy on grass alone. We currently have basically 30 head of cattle. We average 30 head of cattle on the farm every year. You know how that goes. Some come, some go. And so that's a little bit about our herd. So let's talk about, we're here today to kind of focus on what we do for Bale grazing, but I also call it wet management. So we have been doing some version of winter bale grazing for 7 years. We obviously lease our own hay ground, so we make our own hay. So we are feeding wet wrapped hay. This is truly wet bales. So we cut in the late afternoon, and that bale is baled and wrapped before, lunch the following day. We also have to contract our hay out. We can't make enough for our own farm. So to Justine's point, it's really important to know how much hay you need in order to accomplish this job. So we bring on over 200 bales every summer to have. Yes, we have leftover, but we don't want to be in that position where we are, scrounging to find high quality hay sources for our herd, because that is the only form of nutrition that our herd gets, is the hay and the free choice mineral program that we offer. So quality is super important. And I will talk a little bit later that we do nutritional analysis on our tests, on our bales. So just to kind of show you, also reiterates what Justine talked about, record keeping is critical, right? So this is just a super quick snapshot of my farm in a different way. I just draw on it. I'm old school. Troy, I know, is on the call. I use his maps too. I'm a pencil paper girl. Technology is great, but for me, sometimes just whipping out a notebook and writing it down is helpful. And I thought it was fun. This picture up in the upper left-hand corner happens to be taken from Web Soil Survey. I'm a huge proponent of it. And I think it's wonderful when you can see on a satellite image the evidence of your bale grazing efforts. So that is kind of super cool to just be reminded that, it is being seen. And the bottom, of course, is our on-demand geothermal water fountain. We do this all winter long, so long as our ground conditions allow. We also do not have structures, so we use living barns in the winter. So it's important that we always know where I am and where we're going, so that I can manage my herd, manage my land, and be able to pivot during inclement weather. We do this for a variety of reasons. Certainly our soil health is at the crux of what we're doing here, but we also do it for herd management. Like I said, we don't have a barn, and so we need to be moving our animals in a way that is, sustainable to our land. We do it also, of course, for organic matter, but for fun, I did pull up our 2024 soil tests, and our soil is now ranging from 6.0 to 7.4 for organic matter. And when we started, we were at roughly 2. So you can certainly see how these strategies, when put together, I certainly can't say it's exclusively bale grazing, because we are intensive land managers during the grazing season. So it's probably a combination of everything that we do. So when we first started our grazing journey, we thought it was super important that we protect our pastures. So in our head, we thought that the only way we could protect our pastures was to completely confine our animals in the winter months. But that kind of was counterintuitive and went against some of what our goals were. And, it went against what we feel is humane treatment of our herd and giving them access to pastures and movement frequently. We felt that our animal behavior changed. They kind of got stupid when they got confined for too long, and anxious almost, and jittery. It became a muddy mess in a really small area. It was sloppy and it was ugly. And then that in turn creates for a dirty coat, and a dirty coat doesn't allow an animal to properly insulate themselves in the winter. So again, against what we felt was important for our farm. So we knew we had to do something. So this happened when our final kind of like epiphany. I was like, that's it, we're done. We need to figure something out. We had a single access point to where we fed and where we were going. So year 1, we decided that we were going to use the materials that we had on hand, and we had a small herd. Our herd has grown with us, which is great. It's a good strategy because it allowed us to kind of learn with our animals. So we had a feeder on hand already, and while it was on skids, it was not intended to be pulled around the farm the way we wanted it to be, but it was a good first try. You know, we got out there and we started moving it. As you can imagine, it was a challenge because we had to get equipment out there. If the weather wasn't right, the ground conditions weren't right, then we certainly weren't moving it. I failed to mention in my introduction that my husband and I both work full-time off our farms. So every decision we make has to be about efficiency and our time management and how we can make it fit in with our careers. So my husband is gone a lot. He's an engineer and he travels, and I am very thankful that I get to work for American Farmland Trust as a conservation planner, writing conservation plans for farms here in Connecticut, livestock operations who might want to adopt or enhance the regenerative practices that they're doing. So this method, back to my farm, this method, worked, but had a lot of flaws. And so we knew we needed to do something different. So you saw some of these pictures on Justine's slides. We decided to try placing the bales. So as I had said, my husband traveled a lot. We had really small children and I was doing everything. And I said, I can't be running equipment with these little kids and going to my job and trying to figure it out. So we tried this bale placement method. And I will say that it is great to putting bales where you want them in advance. So you certainly have immediately eliminated the equipment challenges that you might have due to sloppy conditions. For us, in a smaller herd, we felt that the waste was too high. So cattle behavior is, they'll eat a little bit and then they wanted to bed in it pretty quick, like night one. And then they were really reluctant, despite how hard I pushed, to wanting to go back to a bale that they have bedded in. So we finished out this year, and while it was, a good strategy, it was not the right strategy for us with the variables that I have given to you. So again, we looked around our yard and went, hey, we have a head slatted hay trailer. And we said, we're going to give that a try. And so we put round bales on it, and we moved this hay trailer across our acres through a very systematic method. This allows me to kind of plan where they're going to go during a weather event, and I can move the herd pretty quickly and their feed pretty quickly should we have a warming trend or a rain event coming. So it really allowed for me to have some systematic movement. You might be asking yourself, well, is my organic matter deposited the same? Probably not to the 60% that Justine was talking about, but we still have plenty of litter left behind from animal behavior. They pull their bite off, they flink it over their head, whatever. For us at this build organic matter stage of the game, we're very happy where we are. So what they're doing is sufficient enough for us because now we are no longer using organic matter as a primary goal for moving forward. But it is important to note, as Justine shared too, that you always need to have a plan and you always need to know what you're doing and where you're doing it. So I have to have laneways set up back to those waters, back to my living barns, so that I can pivot quickly should I need to. So this isn't just like set it and forget it. Like you can't just throw things out there and just be like, done. It doesn't work that simple. I have to make sure I know what I'm doing. So this is where I was going to mention briefly that we do nutritional analysis of our hay. This feeding in this format allows me to still manage if I want different nutritional content out there. And I apologize if you can see, I thought I quieted my teams. This happens to be 3 different types of bales. So they have a pure clover bale, they have an alfalfa bale, and they have some orchard grass mixes here. So it still allows me to control the type of feed that they're getting. Clearly body condition is, I don't have to be worried about body condition scores on my herd. I tend to get a little fluffier on this method with our cattle. but we're okay with that with the movement that they're doing throughout the season. So this is just an aerial picture of one of our systems. It's important to reiterate that this is another management practice. So I cannot look at my grazing season and my bale grazing season separately because they are the same component. So I need to select areas that I want to bale graze before my grazing season is finished, because I do allow those areas to stockpile a little bit, not the stockpiling that I think should be happening, but I do not graze certain areas that I know I'm going to be bale grazing in the wintertime. I also need to simultaneously be selecting where my animals are going to start grazing in the spring, because where I'm bale grazing through the winter months can't be where I put my animals on in the spring. And I saw that Brendan had a question about this. So for me, where I bale graze through the winter are the last places I start to graze. And I'm not even gonna say spring. I start grazing some of these places in late June. They need a longer recovery time because, let's be honest, those cattle, for me, cattle are still eating the stockpile forages that are there simultaneous to the bales that I'm offering them. So they are, in essence, overgrazing. That is a disturbance. So I need to make sure that I give those paddocks that have had animal pressure on them throughout the winter months under bales adequate time to rest before I put them back on it for the grazing season. So for me, this is about whole year planning, and not necessarily looking at it in just how I manage my animals in the wintertime. So I think it's always important to kind of get excited about what bale grazing does. So it sometimes looks messy. There's a lot of litter left behind. All great things. We all know they're great, but sometimes it's hard to kind of get over that. So I show you what this is spring one. So think about it that the animals have just kind of come off of this. This is a pasture in recovery after having been bale grazed hard through the winter. So you can certainly see the remnants of bales left behind, and that's okay. We don't care. That's all great. And Justine told us why. As soon as those pastures have adequate forage heights for me, I get those animals back on it. You do see that we do exclusively graze our 3 horses with our cattle. That's what they eat too. So if our cows eat it, our horses eat it too. So we get those animals right back on it. So now this would be the following year. So think about it. It's really 1 year post bale grazing. And the only real remnants you can see are in this bottom right-hand corner of a bale location. And then finally, so this is now 2 years post-grazing, you see no evidence that there was bale remnants behind, and you see, lush pastures that are diverse in forage species. So, this is another byproduct of why we bale graze, which is super beneficial to us. So I say keep an open mind, be flexible. This year, so while I shared with you already that we didn't have enough animal units to adequately eat bales placed directly on the ground, I had an equipment failure this past winter. So winter of 2024, 2025, I had equipment failure and I could not lift bale with a bale grabber. And so I was very thankful that we had snow load on the ground, and I literally dragged bales into my paddocks that my animals were in and left them on the ground. So I mention this because you should always be keeping everything in mind and revisiting something that may not have historically worked out for you, but recognize that it could be a viable option should something occur and force you to pivot. And so I'm thrilled that we are able to pivot and that we are able to have many tools in our toolbox to make our farming operation work for us, work for our animals, and work for our environment, because we certainly don't want to ever leave our land resources in a worse way than we started. So I just mentioned that this is this most current year, and it is nice to be reminded that, putting a bale on the ground can and will work on our farm. We will continue to use our trailer just for time management, but when we're in a pickle, we know that this is a great strategy too. So bale grazing isn't just for the winter for us. And so as I said, we really do adaptive management grazing. We graze intensively, those 12-hour rotations, but we certainly know where we are and where we're going next. And if we see that there is an inclement storm coming and that we're going to get a lot of rainfall where they might currently be and they shouldn't be there for a lot of rain, we will pivot and move quickly, whether we can move to another paddock for grazing or whether we go to summer bale grazing. We also use this in addition to weather events. If we happen to have pastures that need an extended recovery period, we're going to pull them into kind of like these marginal areas or areas that we are in pasture renovation for. And we've also figured that we can use this for travel. We have a young family and we want to go places. And so we have figured out how we can make this happen. And this is easier to have a farm sitter come and, monitor this than it is for them to necessarily do our grazing system. So we use this kind of all the time. So bale grazing is a good strategy for us. And then I just wanted to say thank you to SARE for giving me the opportunity to kind of share a little bit about what we do on our farm in terms of bale grazing, to remind everybody that it's a journey and that, what was right last year might not be right this year, and to just always be flexible and having another idea about how you might do something. So thank you very much, Rachel.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate it. We had a couple questions come in that were specific to your presentation. So I think we'll answer some of those now, and then we can jump into our next presenter. And I know I'm skipping past a few questions. I promise we will get to everybody's questions and comments, but let's see where.
And I can go back through, Rachel, and look at them too, and make sure I answer and address everything as well. So whatever you've kind of filtered out.
Sure. So Jenny, Troy is asking, what's the decision points behind not constructing a hardened sacrifice area for you?
It's a great question, and one we ask ourselves often, and we certainly go back and forth on it. We do have a what I would call not quite a hard surface, so it's not a concrete surface, but we do have a sacrifice area that is available at our discretion should we choose to use it. I think one of the biggest reasons is that we haven't committed to a permanent location is that our farm has continued to evolve with us. And so when we started farming here in 2008, it looks very different. And even now we are still finding new places that we could potentially put this area. So I guess right now we're just we have a space, while not concrete, we can use it, that we're not quite sure we're ready to commit to that final location. So we just make sure we manage to avoid having a bigger problem. I don't know if I answered Troy's question exactly or not, but we can catch up offline.
One last question for you in particular, Jenny, is do you rotate which paddocks you use for winter bale grazing each year?
Yes, I do. And you can't see it on the pictures, and I certainly didn't dive too deep into it, but I essentially work in giant rectangles, and then I run back lines. I call them backlines. Everybody calls them a different thing, but essentially it's, I'm stopping them from going into a new area. I do this whether it's summer grazing or winter grazing. So it allows me to control the access that they have. And yes, I do choose different areas. I couldn't cover enough ground in a winter on 35 acres, so to speak, right? And so it's important for me to kind of be like tighter, denser, and use that same method that I would use in the summer, but use in the winter time. So this isn't like I'm not covering all 35 acres. I should have clarified that. I don't cover all 35 acres that are fenced. There are a few, there's about 5 acres that I probably would never do this with, just because the ground conditions are a little bit too volatile in the winter time. So knowing your landscape is really important. I'd have to make sure I have super frozen ground before I could move animals to certain areas. And right now, Connecticut winters are not as predictable as they once had been. So yes, new area almost every season.
Great. And then one last thing I'll mention before we jump to our next farmer presentation. In Jenny's presentation, she mentioned that Troy Bishop does have some grazing charts. I don't know if everybody saw in the chat, but he did post a link. So certainly feel free to check those out as well. And we can include that in our monthly correspondence moving forward too for you, Troy. So so everybody has access to that in case you aren't seeing it in the chat. All right, so next up, I'd like to invite, sorry, Ben Kerper, who is the owner of Wild Harmony Farm in Rhode Island. He has some experience with bale grazing as well, again with beef cattle. And Ben, I will let you take it away from there.
All right, thank you so much. Let me get my presentation shared. That was a great intro.
Looks great.
Justine and Jenny, very interesting in what you've been doing. We've had a pretty similar story here. Wild Harmony Farm has been around for 14 years, and we have changed a lot over the years also. It started out kind of as just like a homestead farm where my wife and I wanted to grow all of our own food, and accidentally turned into a business. And at the beginning, we had, the first year, I think we had 1 cow with a calf and 2 dairy sheep and 2 pigs and 10 laying hens and 10 turkeys and a few meat chickens. And even then, 14 years ago, I didn't know the term then, but I guess we were bale grazing in the winter. It was just small square bales, and we would carry them out by hand and feed them in a different place every day. So because we could see that the manure was getting distributed more evenly as if we were moving it around, not really knowing the effect of it at the time. And it's evolved quite a bit to today, where we still fair to finish pigs. We direct market meat. That's our main sales, is just selling meat. So we do fair to finish pasture raised organic pigs. And now all we do is grass finish the cattle. We have done cow calf. We have done the stocker phase, and we have switched to just buying them in the spring and finishing them over the spring and summer and fall. And so the majority of our bale grazing doesn't happen anymore because we aren't feeding hay through the winter. We still do some, which I'll talk about in dry summers. But most of the bale grazing that we've done is in the past, and I'll share a number of reasons for why we have evolved to where we are in that. But this picture is pretty typical. The probably 60% of our pasture space is silvopasture like this, which we developed about 5 years ago. And it's bale grazing was really important for us in getting forages established in there. What wants to come up when you this was all dense forest before, and we thinned out about half of the trees, and what wants to come up is usually shrubby things that cows don't want to eat. And so we found that with the bale grazing, it would knock down a bunch of those shrubs. It would put organic matter out there. One of the really interesting things that we didn't anticipate is that it actually spreads a lot of seed. And so it is valuable to understand what is the hay that you're feeding. We've never made our own hay, and I don't intend to ever make my own hay. And so we're always buying it in from somewhere, and that can be good or bad. We've bought very weedy hay, and we see patches of things that we've never seen come up the next year. And we've bought, well mature first cut, and good grasses will come up the next year. Well mature second cut, and we'll get clovers coming up the next year, just from the seed that was in the hay. We've done it in winter and spring, or winter and in the summer. This is a picture from the summer, one of the drier summers, where the pastures all went brown, which is actually the reason that we developed our silvopasture. That this whole webinar series is on livestock and climate change, and I feel like the greatest thing we've done to be more resilient in the face of climate change is to develop all this silvopasture that stays green and growing right through even the driest summers that we've had. But we've still had a few years that we've had to feed a little bit of hay. Before the silvopasture, a dry summer might have us feeding hay for 8 weeks. And in the last 2 dry summers, the longest we had to feed hay was 8 days, because we could just graze the silvopasture even though the fields were totally dry. So this was one of the areas that we converted into silvopasture. This was before the conversion, and I've got a couple of pictures kind of during and after the process, but this was more or less what it looked like before. There are a few open areas here or there, but for the most part, pretty dense trees. This is kind of partway through the logging process. You can see it. I mean, the logging just leaves bare dirt. There wasn't much there before anyways, a few things growing here and there, but for the most part, it was bare dirt to begin with. And after the loggers go through, it's really just bare dirt after that. And so the silvopasture was really helpful or the bale grazing was really helpful to get forages established after the logging process. This is towards the end. This was kind of a good time marker for me. This is my son who's 5 now. So the logging was just about 5 years ago. And this is that same area a few years after bale grazing, where you can see all the forages are established pretty well at this point. I don't unfortunately have any pictures of summertime here, so this is pretty brown looking, but here is gives you a little idea. This is my same son who is 2 in this picture, and the forages are really well established at this point 2 years later. So one of the things that we realized fairly early on was, like I said before, what hay we were feeding really determined what grew back afterwards. And you can see there's plenty of weeds in this picture too that came up on their own. So we did start to add seed. And this kind of strip of orchard grass that you see right down the middle of this picture, that was because we were kind of just walking through blindly with a belly seeder spreading orchard grass seed. And you can see really clearly where we walked and where we didn't walk. So the areas that outside of that strip of orchard grass was just what came up from the hay itself. And so at this point, we've decided that it is really beneficial to spread seed before or during the bale grazing. The cows do a good job of stomping on it and planting it for you. So if you can get whatever seed you want out there, in addition to the seed that's coming in the hay, we've had really great success with that. It takes a lot of hay and to feed through the winter. When we first started out, we were feeding hay about 6 months, October to April. I have since learned how to understand the finances of the farm and realized that there was no way that we could make that profitable. And so the first thing that we tried was stockpiling forages to shorten the length of time that we were feeding hay. And we got as far as mid-January that we could graze into mid-January, but we were still feeding hay almost 100 days at that point, and that still doesn't pencil out for us. I figured that we'd have to get down to feeding hay for 30 days for it to make any sense, and I'm not a good enough stockpiler of grass yet to be able to do that. So we instead decided to stop raising. At this point we were buying yearlings and grazing them for the summer, feeding them over the winter, and then finishing them the following summer. And once we realized that it just really wasn't working financially, we decided to make this shift to buying 2-year-olds or even a little bit older, and eliminating the hay. So at this point you know, when this picture was taken, this was probably 3 or 4 years ago. We were buying 120 bales a winter. We basically figured out that we could. What was ideal for us was to feed 1 bale a day, and we did, like Jenny. We tried a whole bunch of different ways of feeding it. Originally, we would just drop the whole bale in one place and let the cows all crowd around it. But we also realized that they were wasting an incredible amount of it, because just the same as Jenny's story, they would be really happy the first day. They would sleep on it the first night and poop all over it the first morning, and they wouldn't want to eat it the second day, even though 2/3 the bale was still there. So we decided to switch to rolling the bales out instead, and we stuck with that all the way. Or that's still what we do if when we do bale graze. I really like that method a lot, and we found it the most efficient use of the hay is if we allotted 1 day worth of hay rolled out, not any more than that, and any less than that, and you're just having to do it twice a day, which we didn't want to do. And we figured about 1 bale to 20 cattle worked for us, and that was we were usually averaging 800-pound 1.5 to 2-year-olds that were eating that. So 20 800-pounders to 1 bale of hay, and that would be if it was dry, probably a 600 or 700-pound bale, and if it was wet, 1,000 to 1,200-pound bale. We've done both wet and dry bales. We've always unrolled them by hand, so the dry bales are just easier to move. We would always place them at the top of a hill just to make our jobs easier, and ideally we would place them all at the beginning of the fall, get them out there while it's dry, just fence them off at the top of the hill. And then we get them all placed in 1 or 2 days, just right next to each other on their side, so that all we'd have to do is unwrap it and push it. And if the hill was steep enough, it would unroll itself, or sometimes the cows would unroll it. Sometimes we'd have to push some. But that seemed to work really well. There was, I would say maybe they were eating 70% of it, 60%, something like that, which was a lot more efficient than when we were just dropping the whole bale and letting them feed off of the bale in one location. Another reason that we way prefer unrolling is the regrowth in that first year. Just like Jenny had said, when we were dropping a whole bale, it was 2 years before that bale had totally disintegrated into the ground, and you couldn't really tell it was there anymore. The first summer, it would just be like brown crusty hay and nothing growing through it, and the next year it would start to grow through that spot, and that seemed kind of just like a waste of ground for us. The one exception, one reason that I think that is beneficial is if you're actually trying to get rid of a certain plant, and we have found it effective for getting rid of multiflora rose, which is probably the only thing other than pigs that we found effective at that. But if you drop a whole bale right on a multiflora rose plant, then 2 years later it's gone, and just good grass comes up through it. So at any rate, we had kind of evolved to unrolling 1 bale a day. Then even if it rained, they're still eating it the first day, and no matter how much you put out there, my experience is once it's rained on, they don't really want to touch it 24 hours later. So it was minimal waste. It probably took us a half an hour a day of labor. We would have the bales all lined up behind a polywire fence just so that the cows didn't mess with them, and we would just lay the fence down and roll the bale right over the fence. So it really was pretty simple. We didn't have to start a machine during the winter. We didn't have to move any fencing other than laying it down on the ground. Here is a video of that process that one of our staff took one year, just to give you a little bit of an idea. It goes pretty fast. It's like a time lapse video, but basically she's starting with the bale behind the fence, and you'll see her unwrap it. We've always used wrapped bales, mostly just because there's less. I guess my presumption is that there's less waste because it's staying dry because we're putting them out there in September or October, but we're not feeding them until December or January. So they stay drier until you're ready to feed them. So she unwraps the bale and then pushes it down the hill, and you get to watch the cows do their thing. So again, fairly easy for one person to push them. Even a 600 or 700 pound bale, if it's on just a slight bit of a hill, it's pretty easy to get it down the hill. One occasional complication with that was when the bale's wrapped, you can't tell which way the hay was wrapped, and one way it will unravel on its own, and the other way you kind of have to like unravel it itself or turn the bale around. And so that, if you were making your own hay, you could draw on the outside of the plastic which way the hay was wrapped. If we had it set up the wrong way, which was again just a 50-50 guess, we would usually kind of roll it out about halfway, just peeling off the layers as you go until it's light enough that you could flip it around and then push it out the rest of the way that it actually was wrapped. And then I've got another video of summer bale grazing. This was just last summer. This was a new farm that we took over 3 winters ago. So we've had it for 2 grazing seasons. According to the Web Soil Survey, which we do frequently use, this was much better soil than the soil that we have, which is we have really, really sandy and rocky soil. And this was, I think, a sandy silt loam or something, and like pretty ideal. It's classified as prime farmland, and ours is classified as like, don't ever try and grow anything here because it's terrible soil. And so we were assuming that this was going to be really productive pasture for us. But I knew overgrazing was bad, but I don't think I realized how bad. That this particular farm had been continuous grazed for as long as I've been here. So that, the 13 years that I've been here, that I was watching cows get dropped off here in May and picked up in November. They were just left out in the whole 16 acres for the whole year. And so it looked like a golf course all the time. And so I really didn't know what to expect, to what would grow back once we gave it some rest. And the answer is almost nothing. In this picture, the grass that's there is very stemmy. It's a lot of sweet vernal grass. The cows really don't want to eat much of anything that's there. And that 16 acres we have grazed in the last 2 summers, we grazed it for 8 days, each of those summers, with 8 cattle. And we were supplement feeding them during that time. And that was as much as it could support. Whereas the contrast is the pastures that we have, which is on soil that's rated worse, but it's been managed better. We can graze about 25 cattle for 6 rotations per year, which is anywhere between 18-day rest and a 60-day rest if it's really dry, but typically we're around a 30-day rest period. So way more forage growth on much worse quality soil. I attribute that mostly just to pasture management. So last summer, this was kind of just an experiment. We just wanted to try and get a whole bunch of organic matter down and smush down some of this low quality forage. So off in the distance here, you can kind of see behind this step-in posts where we had done it for the week before. They've already smashed all that down, and we fed a bunch of hay out there. We would give them a really small area, roll out a bale, let them eat a little bit, whatever they wanted that was out there of the grass, and then, give them some supplemental feed because we knew there wasn't really enough quality nutrition out there. That's, if we do have to feed hay in the summer, we much prefer to do it on pasture so it doesn't completely change their rumen microbes. Like, we want them to still be getting some green grass, even if there isn't a whole lot of it, in addition to the hay, so so it doesn't upset their system. We, because we're just a finishing operation, we're really concerned with average daily gain, and that was another reason that we decided to stop overwintering cattle. Is we were calculating average daily gain over the winter, and when we first started, it was around 1/4 pound a day through the winter, and we thought, well, so maybe we just need to buy better hay, and we, by the end of it, we were buying the highest quality dairy feed that we could find, that was organic, certified organic, second cut dairy hay from Vermont. And even at that, we still only got up to 3/4 pound a day, which wasn't worth the cost. And the change in the price of a 1-year-old to a 2-year-old, even if you're just following the cattle markets, it's a lot less than it was costing us to feed that animal from 1 to 2. And so that's when we kind of finally made the decision to switch over, because now we buy most of our cattle from the south, where they can graze through the winter and their average daily gain stays up, and so the meat quality at the end ends up higher than anything that we could produce here. This, interestingly, we just got this report back last week, which I find fascinating for this presentation, because this is like an overview of our farm, showing the soil organic matter, and all of the blue areas, which are around 2%, according to this soil analysis. Those are all of our open fields. All of the, well, I'm colorblind, but I think this is kind of tan. That's all silvopasture where we have not fed hay recently. Probably 4 or 5 years ago we might have, but not recently. And the red areas that are up around 9%, those are the last 2 places that we bale grazed. And so it's very obvious from this analysis how big of a difference it makes, going from 2 to 9% just from a winter of bale grazing. It is massive. The soil tests that we have done, we've sent them off to UMass, like Justine's tests. They show more in the range of 3 to 6%. All of our fields were 2 or 3% on that type of a soil test. I don't know. I'm curious to ask the organization that did this if it's a different type of test that is the reason that it's showing the soil carbon so low in the fields. What we see at this point is mostly 4, 5, and 6%, even though they started at 2, and most of them at 2 and 3. I think I covered everything. Yeah, I guess I can stop there, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate your time and sharing your insight. I didn't have anything come through during your presentation, but certainly feel free to answer or post questions in the chat, and Ben, you can answer throughout the next presentation. And then if we have some time at the end, anything that's not answered, we'll definitely wrap up with. I want to move, just in interest of time, to our last presenter today, who actually is Mary Burley from Lila's Mountain Farm in Massachusetts. She is new to bale grazing this year. I'm just pulling up her presentation now. Mary, I just want to make sure that you can see.
Hi, yeah, I can see it, and it's in perfect. Rachel, thank you so much for having me, and also for running the presentation, because it turns out I'm not a WebEx user, so I'm actually working off my phone here. But hello, everybody, and appreciate being here. Yes, we're brand new to bale grazing, but we are a farm that has been around since the 1790s as originally 3 separate dairy farms, each supporting one family. In 1991, my parents bought the farm so that my mother could expand her flock of sheep that at that point was about 40 sheep. I grew up on a subsistence farm with my siblings and my parents, and my mom wanted to get serious. And so this piece of land that we're on now represents that. So she expanded the flock to up to 700. And then at 83 years old, as COVID came through, her model pretty much collapsed. She was selling to restaurants, and then the focus was she was wholesaling her wool, and she was selling to restaurants and to large religious gatherings, all of which stopped. And so that's when I came through. And so I've been working on the farm I've been owning and managing for the last 4 years. And next slide, Rachel. And so our strategy now is to run fewer animals and improve the quality of the wool, and also have our products be not dependent on restaurants or religious gatherings, which are drying up as the next generation wants things in packages. So this year we wintered 320 ewes, yearlings, and rams. And we're focused specifically on wool and meat, and we grow all of our own hay. And there's, I think, one of the great things about my mom's legacy is no pesticides or herbicides on the field since she started. And I think for the 1990s, she was doing pretty progressive grazing, but as we go through this, you'll see it was time for a change. Next slide. So our products are food, fiber, and flowers now. We've expanded to flowers for designers. There's a lot of special events in Berkshire County where we're located, Berkshire County, Massachusetts. And so I'm wholesaling meat to local farm stores, 3 different local farm stores, and also a New York City market. And we're 3D printing sweaters with the Japanese knitting machine partnership, mother-son team, Muriel's of Vermont, and we're making yarn and blankets, and we're kind of really expanding the wool business. This year will be our first year of a P&E CSA. We have 1,000 plants in the ground, and I think we have 6,000 flowering shrubs. So we're really trying to grow that as a revenue source. And then we've just started pelletizing our wool, which we're selling 4 ounces at a time for $6 for house plants. And it turns out it's a really good item to have on our when we're selling sweaters, which are like $220 and up. So it's an accessible product that people love. And my niece made that label, so that was fun. Next. So these are just some examples of our products. My son is wearing one of our sweaters. This is Peony Nosegay, which is one of our early favorites. And next slide. We're also working with artists. Julie Rose Clapton made this cape out of our fiber last year. She's doing 1 or 2 bespoke pieces a year starting last year, and she actually won a UNESCO World Heritage Award, Craft Award for makers under 25 for that piece, and it's on display in London through May. She's lambed with me for the last 2 years. She was here for all of February, which was a tough time to be bale grazing and lambing. And I think when she left, she said, it just convinced me I really love this place and lambing. So that was a pretty good outcome for what was actually pretty difficult conditions. Okay, next. So here's an example. So this is a 17-acre field. We have a third of our land is very ledgy, rocky, just pasture. A third is fenced, and we're rotating for pasture, but we're also grazing. And then a third is not fenced, and we're just haying that. And we're feeding about 600 round bales a year that we make. But these are our sweaters, Julie and her mother. And they're on a field which you can see has been overgrazed. It's getting like a 95 on the soil tests for soil health. But this is at the beginning of when it stopped raining last summer, and it's an example of some of the opportunity. So, but the sweaters look good. Next. So this is the third ledge, third pasture, a third for cutting, and we'll do a next one. And so traditionally in the winter, my mother used the yard, and I have actually for the last 3 years as well. That was the original dairy yard. This is a picture of it. And what you can't see, but which is kind of important for this presentation, and I for real reasons, don't take close-ups very often, but that black hole in there is just like a pool of water. So the water runs off the hill below the farmhouse, and that barn up on the upper right is a 1790s barn. The house was actually built over a stream because the family who started the farm was cooling their milk in the basement. Would never get that past the USDA now, but there's a lot of water that runs off that hill and right into the yard. And so that is definitely a resource concern. The other thing that is a challenge about our yard is that there's a public road. You can see the guardrails, I think, in the picture that run right through the middle of the farm. And we actually had a woman last year who was running a business walking people through the yard. So since COVID, there's been a lot of pressure on the animals. People have moved to our area and just want to see sheep, and it's actually pretty disruptive for the guardian dogs and the sheep. So we're driving us out of our own yard. Okay, next. And then here's an example of the ledge. We have this, I think my mom accurately identified this farm as, or what was left of it after the dairy farmers sold off all their frontage to take care of their kids. We have a lot of ledge, a lot of high rocky ledge. And so these are some of this year's lambs showing off the ledge. It's a lot of fun for playing if you're a lamb, not so great for grazing. And so above the field above where they are in this picture is where we did our bale grazing this winter. So next one. So I had a long career in public education. And so just coming into this 4 years ago and knowing we had all these resets, I've been really lucky to have a number of really positive inputs, including Desiree, who may or may not be on here today, with American Farmland Trust. Sarah Flack has been really helpful to us. And then Ben Fellows, who is an NRCS program officer, who's now in Hawaii also. All three of them have been very kind about our overgrazing and seeing the opportunity in this farm and the opportunity to build on what's good and make improvements. And anyway, we got a $10,000 grant from American Farmland Trust to improve some fencing, and that helped us to start ideas that Sarah and Desiree and Ben were floating about bale grazing. And so here we are. Next. So one of the things that I had to start with is, so this is the field and there's a fence. I had two groups. I had 60 ewes that I was not breeding, and that were in a cull group, and then a much bigger group on the other side of the fence. And so figuring out logistics in the beginning. Next. I was lucky to have enough tractor support that because I didn't plan ahead that I was going to be bale grazing, we didn't have all of our hay lined up perfectly for this strategy. And I had a lot of trouble as we were making the transition to feeding hay. I couldn't just open gates wherever I felt like it. And so we had to do some sort of silly things that I won't have to do in the future because we'll have a plan. Next. One of the reasons that we could, in addition to the fencing, bale graze is we have really good dogs. And when I started, we had only 2 guardian dogs, and we were losing sheep almost every night. And I've expanded. Now we have 3 in their prime, 2 retired who are over 10 years old and do a good job hanging out. And then these 2 on the left are 18-month-old puppies born on the farm who are coming along really well. But there's no way that we would be able to have the flock up on this without these dogs who are just on it all the time. Next. So this was November, and just starting to figure it out. And you can see the sheep I really think they loved being up there instead of in the yard. And if we go another one, they're really holding condition pretty well. Next, we watched the Great Barrington wildfire that you might have read about from our perch up there. This was just sort of special interest, but we had terrible dryness and a huge wildfire in Great Barrington, and that's picture from then. Next. This is getting further along, and I just moved. It's a pretty big field, and I just every time that I was dropping a bale, I dropped it in another new clean spot. And I think the other farmers, that was really thoughtful about waste. What was good for us is how clean this was, and I think I did not unroll anything. It's just me feeding. I'm feeding every day. I fed 2 or 3 bales a day to the large group, and my experience is that they did a really good job cleaning up, and the quality of the hay totally matters. And we're very focused on baling our haylage at just the right moment. And when we do that, and with bale grazing, I think we have a lot less than 3 inches of waste anywhere. Whereas in the yard, it definitely builds up, and I think there's a lot more waste. Next. So you can see now we're moving down the field, and you can see the spots where each bale was. And the story was continuing to unfold, and I'll know a lot more in a few months how this comes back. But the organic matter, I think even if it's a 2-year process, it's worth it for us for this field, which has almost just does not have a lot of dirt on top of the rocks. Next. And then February, we got into lambing, and I think February was cold here, as all of you know. And I did have gates open so that the flock had access to one of our upper barns. We actually spent most of the month with them lambing outside, and then with crampons on. And this also would not have been possible before the flock adopted me as their shepherd, but every single ewe just followed me down this very steep, actually the slope with the rocky, the slope with the rocky ledge that you saw, just carrying lambs down with ewes following me, which wasn't ideal. And I think we did lose 3 lambs to exposure. We have a very good survival rate with our lambs. We're at like 3% loss maybe, which is just a really good reflection of health and vigor and my mom's breeding for animals on this landscape. But I don't want to lamb again in February with this strategy. So next. Yeah, so when it was really cold up there and the ewes weren't coming down for me to the upper barn to lamb, I just started playing around with if I put bales out in advance where they can huddle up and have a windbreak, does that help? And I think it did. Not all of them took advantage of it, but I spent a lot of time up there with them, touching lambs and getting them down quickly. Next one. Yeah, so there's another, you can look up the hill and see all the different spots. So I don't know what the strategy will be. I think we'll probably move fields next year, and I certainly in conversation with all these great technical folks, but between where I have them, I mean, these are huge areas that we have. So there's definitely some empty spaces there, but it'll give us a good sense of what the actual difference is. Next. And then this is late March next, or not late March, late February. And then this is this week looking up from across a hayfield I don't know if you can see, it may not be depending on the size of your screen, but at the very top, you can see the patches where the bales were. Next one. So from a fiber perspective, we've learned a lot. I think this was driven by trying to improve the field, the ledgy field, which we know all of you have seen a lot of data on how that happens already, and we're just counting on that being the case. But I think the benefits that I was not expecting and that are really exciting for us are the flock health. Bale grazing up there rather than being in the yard was just outstanding. So we in the big wet not last summer that was dry, but the summer before, we'd had almost no hoof problems going into that, but we did end up with hoof problems while everyone was standing in water all summer. And we've finally we're totally ahead of all of that. I had no prolapses at all. The lambs, I didn't teach, I think I taught one lamb all winter, had a nurse, so they were just coming out ready. And the ewes were probably walking a little more to water than they would have, definitely walking a little more to water than they would have in the yard. And I think that probably helped. But then the biggest win in terms of the business immediately is that we sheared 144 yearlings for their lamb's wool clip March 6th. And we took them off the bale grazing, got them into the main barn, sheared them within 24 hours. And there were the belly wool was completely clean. We had no tags. Some of the cleanest fleeces that we've ever since my mom started that we've sheared. So that's super exciting and really helps with yield, and is just for that alone, I think we would bale graze. And then the other thing is just the psychological benefits of not being near the road are just huge for us. But yeah, and I didn't go home at night or into the house at night just covered in mud all winter, so that was huge. Next. Yeah, so we're definitely on the program to do a lot more of this. Because so many aspects of our business are changing, we got a lot of moving targets. I'm going to shift lambing to later in the spring, and I just need to do it early enough that I can get into the flower field in time. And I think we've traditionally sheared in October. We were already making the decision to shear last year's lambs in March, and I think as the flock ages out of the October, and every new lamb now will do a spring shearing, and that will help in terms of giving them good cover in the winter when they're not using the barn as much. And then the other thing I'm really thinking a lot about is as we hay this year, where am I going to move all my bales so that they're in the right spot for really efficient bale grazing, and that'll save on fuel and all kinds of things. And then the other part is thinking through water resources, water and fencing to support this. Next. Yeah, so I have actually a question for the group, which is because I've shared the yearlings in March, I've got everybody back down in the yard right now, and I do have a dedicated throwaway pasture around the yard. But I actually feel like since we've been down there, my yearlings who looked just fantastic at shearing, I don't know if I think they look good, but they don't look as good. And I am sure they're just picking up parasites in the yard. And my question is actually around, do I send them back up to that field and keep them on it as the grass is growing up, or is it better to keep them in the sacrifice spot? Obviously, there's the resource concern of the yard being wet, which it is as well. But that's just something I'm thinking about, and I'd love people's thoughts. And then in terms of the barns, I think this project for us raises a whole lot of questions about what else can we use the barns for to support the flower business and infrastructure generally. I think we love sheep and we love the products, and we've also learned that we have to diversify a little bit to make it all work financially. And so I think in the next couple of years, this project and others will stimulate a lot of thinking about how we approach our infrastructure and plan for the next 10 years. That's it. I guess one more, yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. So, you know, I'm recognizing that we're very tight on time. So this is what I'm gonna do. I wanted to let everybody know that first thank all of my speakers today, Justine, as well as the three farmers who have so graciously given us their time and input on their own experiences. And then I also wanted to let everybody know that we do a post-evaluation, sorry, via Slido that I do have active right now. You should see that on the right-hand side of your screen. I would appreciate anybody who would be willing to fill out our evaluation. That does help give us some direction moving forward. So that is ongoing as we're wrapping up here. I know there are some questions in the chat. There are some that both Jenny, Ben, and Justine did answer for us. So certainly feel free to scroll through there. And of course, jump off when you need to, because I know we are over time. But I will engage in the rest of these conversations for anybody who does want to stay. Mary, there were a couple questions that came in after your presentation. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, have you had any trouble with listeria or any other health issues when you're feeding your baleage to the sheep?
We do not have trouble as long as we're very, very serious about baling at the right moisture level. So our preference is like between 42% moisture up to 50. So I've not had any listeria in the last 4 years, but I think my mother learned about that. So, and I think it's you just have to be really disciplined. But the sheep really love the forage, and I think one of the things that I do is, since I'm doing all the baling, I know the moisture content of the different fields and the quality, and so when I'm feeding, I'll balance with feed from different fields depending on, and that's good for, helps with digestion. It's a little trickier when we use sausage bales. When we make the big sausages, we do some of each because those you have to feed pretty consistently. It really, what the biggest key is just making really good hay to start off. And you can't, I would not feed haylage if I were not making it myself for sheep. You have to know what it is.
Mary, there is somebody else who's commenting some thoughts. Her name is Stacy. I'm not sure her last name because it's only her first name in the names, but she is mentioning that she'd love to chat more. She did a bit of bale grazing this winter and they're looking to do more. So she'd love to hear some more of your results and have some further conversation with you. So I'm happy to connect the both of you. Stacy, if you would like to contact me directly after via email, I can connect you with Mary.
Yeah. And anybody that wants to connect with me too, if you go to our website, lilasmountainfarm.com, there's a contact page there.
Great. I encourage everybody to either post your questions, further questions in the chat, or if you would like to raise your hand and just speak up, we can do it that way as well. Jenny also just put her contact information up, so I appreciate you doing that, Jenny. Troy, I see that you've raised your hand. Do you have a comment or a question?
I guess I'll be a little selfish, wondering if there's going to be a possibility of a summer pasture walk to see the results. Would be pretty fun. I know we're going to be doing that here in New York at our Bale grazing site. I thought for each context would be helpful for all farmers in the region. What say you about maybe working together on that?
Absolutely. I'd love to reach out more. We do have follow-up field workshops planned for this summer. Not all of the dates are finalized just yet, so I will be sharing that. Unfortunately, the 3 speakers that we did have today, we are not hosting a field workshop, but we do have some other field workshops planned that have bale grazed before. So certainly more conversation to come. It was my hope for this year that I could actually plan a field workshop at this time of the year to see it in action. But some things derailed us this year, and unfortunately that didn't happen. But that's certainly not to say that we can't follow up with some summer programming and moving forward into the future, trying to plan something for the winter. So Troy, I'm certainly happy to catch up offline on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Ben, I did see as well that you put your contact information up. I appreciate that very much.